Hello, I'm Jeffrey Goodman. Welcome to Musicians Roundtable. Today, I'm happy to be doing an interview with Ben Salfield, who is in Truro, Cornwall, England. I'm currently in Los Angeles. So, Ben, how are you doing there today?
Hi, Jeff. It's great to speak to you again. I'm here on the far southwest tip of the United Kingdom with huge storms raging around me. It's wonderful. I'm stuck at home with lute music and lots of cats.
That sounds like a perfect timing for what we're going to discuss. So I was really happy to see that Bergman, the music publisher, has just published your edition of Thomas Robinson 6 duets in both guitar notation and lute tablature. I'm very happy about the guitar notation because it makes it more accessible to myself and my students. And you have arranged and edited these things. So could you begin by telling us a little bit more about the Elizabethan composer and lutenist Thomas Robinson?
Yes, well, I can literally tell you a little bit because there's not very much known about him. Everything that we know about Thomas Robinson is pretty much gleaned from passing comments and the pages in the introduction to his 1603 tutor for lute, bandora, orpharion, viol, and voice called the School of Music. But despite the fact that it was published over 400 years ago, it's a great tool for lutenists today. And it does, as you asked about, gives a little bit of information about his life. We know he was in the employment of the first Earl of Exeter, Thomas Cecil. And he was also a private tutor to Anne, who was, Princess Anne was later the wife of James I of England. And when he was in Denmark, he was actually her personal tutor. We know this was around sort of the 1580s because, of course, Anne married King James, as he later became, in 1589. I'm sure you already knew that, though, Jeff. So we know that this artistic hub in Denmark, which was the place where people like John Dowland went and so on, was a place where the leading lutenists and composers of the day tried to end up. We think he was born around the 1560s. He wrote several books, we believe, but this is the only one that survives. And it's a great book. It takes you through lutenism, as I call it, the idea of how one should approach playing the lute, and takes you through in relatively quickly from very early stages to quite advanced music.
Wow. So one of the things I was going to mention is that over the years, I've really enjoyed playing lute duets. A few by Robinson. There have not been, I know of only 2 that had been published that I could find. So this adds greatly to that. But also Dowland lute duets. And what I've always admired is that the actual creation of the lute duet was at such a beautiful high level. And I think these lute composers, they really knew how to compose for 2 lutes. So is that also your experience in the repertoire?
I think it's a very strange thing. The duet, to me, stands out very much as almost a separate form of music. Whilst they really, you know, from around 1500, the idea of playing more than one note at the same time, you know, really revolutionized music, as I'm sure even your grade 1 students will attest. But by sort of 1600, the lute duet was in a very advanced form. Today, I've just finished recording my new album of lute duets from this period, from a previous book, a 5-volume edition of English lute duets. And I think that there's something very special about performing and playing and rehearsing duet parts and then seeing it all coming together. There's an added, if you like, I don't know, an added something, je ne sais quoi, about the whole duet experience. You can't really compare it to playing solo music. You're not only interpreting things 50% along with a person, you know, who's playing the other part, but it sort of almost makes a whole new kind of variety of music, or I don't know, it's a very strange thing. It's almost a spiritual thing. You move across from the solo to the duet and suddenly it's like a whole new world of music is unleashed. I love that about the duets.
Yeah, and so in that respect, could you take us through there are six duets here, and of course it's really precious for us today that he decided to publish these. I think 400 years ago, it seems. Um, can you talk a little bit about each of the different pieces and the contents of the book?
Yes, surely. The most important thing I think is to emphasize, which is something you've mentioned already, and that is that first of all, the duets I believe have never been published together as a little collection before, but also that they certainly haven't been published together as a collection for guitarists. And I think that's very important because for me, music only lives as long as it's alive, as long as it's being played, as long as it's being spread throughout a musical community. And a lot of people will have seen the occasional duet, but in this book we have all six of the duets by Robinson. And we start with 20 Ways Upon the Bells, which is a sort of imitation of various church bell sort of chimes, the sort of thing that in an old English village you can still hear on a Sunday morning in many regards. Then the second piece, a plain song, is based on the sort of medieval plain song idea, this sort of religious sounding piece. It's rhythmically quite strange, but it all works out as long as you stick to the sheet. That's the most important thing. I've seen with several students that they try to extend some of the beats in some of the measures because they don't think it's going to work out, but it does as long as you stick to the music. The Passamezzo Galliard, or Passamezzo Galliard as it's written here. I've used all the old spellings, by the way, so it looks a little curious to modern eyes. Is another great piece, number 3. The Passamezzo was a music form that existed both as a minor and a major piece. And this is a great example of the Passamezzo. Then we have the Queen's Good Night. Now, because the words good and night are separate, we don't know if the Queen was having a good night, as in she was partying and having sort of Elizabethan kebabs and much ale, or if it's good night, as in good night, But anyway, lovely piece of music. Then we have a quite strict fantasy, the 5th piece. And now the fantasy was a very strange musical, almost anomaly, you might say. In many cases, and at different times, it changed the way that it worked. And sometimes it was a free-form piece, and sometimes it was actually quite strict. But it always seemed to have lots of sort of unusual counterpoint things going on, and just ways that would entice the player into wanting to seek further into what the piece has to offer. And this is certainly this is certainly a piece that does that. And the final piece is probably the most famous of Robinson's, and it's called A Toy for Two Lutes. And this is a lovely piece of music, very joyful. A toy meant really a sort of short or insignificant piece, but I personally would say that this is neither short nor insignificant. And it's lovely how the harmonies will work together. There's some great runs. It's in a couple of places it gets pretty frantic. In many regards, this is a piece that one of the pieces that I've enjoyed performing over the years with various concert artists from around the world, more than many others. It's just so joyful and falls beautifully on the fingers. I mean, there's a collection. Thomas Robinson's music was ahead of its day in many regards, but I think these duets are some of the most beautiful that were written in this era.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I just recently got my own copy, and it's absolutely wonderful for me to begin to explore it. I will put a link to the Bergman page for anyone who may be interested in checking this out. And I really thank you for taking the time today to introduce this book. Let me just wish you all the best over in Cornwall today, and hope to get back together soon before too long.
That's great. Apparently, the storms are so heavy tonight that if you click your heels 3 times, you end up in Los Angeles.
Well, if you end up in Los Angeles, you'd better bring some good short sleeve shirts, because it's been often over 100 degrees Fahrenheit here for the last week, and so we're really baking here. But what is part of the greatness of music is that once you start into your music, you really move into a different world, and you transcend the pandemic and the current weather patterns, at least for a bit. So again, thank you, and we'll get back together soon. Take care, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you for having me. Bye now.